Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's a lot of pressure going after the couple of talks that happened. But what I wanted to do is speak for the rest of the team members, probably the data scientists and folks who collaborate with you while working on a lot of these dashboards. So I'm going to go a little philosophical, so bear with me. Let me share my screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, perfect. So what I wanted to start off with, this is something that I've been observing over quite some time now. I feel like roles in design or in analytics have started becoming a lot more fragmented. We're speaking about researchers, we're speaking about information architects, and even in data science, we're splitting it across engineering and an architect who's going to build that data structures, to even insights, where we're splitting it across different languages that we learn. But I come from an engineering background, and then I learned data science, and now I have an appreciation for design. So I really enjoy the connections that a lot of these domains have with each other. And I think that's what sets us apart as well. Even my team of designers, all of them come from very different backgrounds, from psychology, from engineering, from architecture, and all of them have something to offer. And that's what makes them extremely unique as well. So this whole presentation is pretty much going to explore the connections that exist between a lot of these domains, with, of course, some emphasis on the design and data science section, right? So let's dive in, right? The first thing that I wanted to start off with is really art and math. I know today these are subjects on the extreme ends, and I know for a fact that designers, of course, hate mathematics, and I'm pretty sure if you ask a mathematician to draw something today, they're going to be like, no, that's not what I do. But there's been a lot of history about the connections that these two domains sort of share. And the ones that we know of is usually, the Starry Night, which has a lot of mathematical phenomena in it, and also the golden ratio, which is being used in Mona Lisa, right? So these are the commonly known examples of where art has used mathematical concepts to come up with symmetry. But there is also another side to that story, right? This particular example that I wanted to talk about is about an artist who used his artistic skills to show and visualize mathematical concepts. So what you see here is relativity, which is more of an illusion, which he was able to draw that wasn't even thought about by mathematicians until that time. So his research and his work was the first starting point for all of these folks to even explore the idea of some of these mathematical concepts, right? And there's a couple more examples, and the circle that you see over there is pretty much different arcs drawn, and that's how that artwork was basically created, right? So this is a very good example of how we usually think about, sure, math is involved in art, but there's always another side to it as well, right? So with that, I want to go to the next section, which is all about design and analytics, which is the core of what I want to talk about, right? And one thing that comes up when we speak about design and analytics is really how we're able to identify patterns very well, right? And I don't like the way that people say left brain and right brain, and they say that one is logical and one is more artistic, and that's something that I'm sure that that's how brain works, but I don't think it's directly, it shouldn't be directly about how you speak about designers as well, right? While they have an artistic side, they do have an analytical and a logical side to them as well, which is what helps them create dashboards in a lot of your cases, as well as different artworks as well. And the same applies for analytics as well, right? While we think of them as folks who explore data and it's all logical, but there are a lot of constraints and a lot of different ways that we end up designing the algorithm as well, in terms of what should the accuracy metrics be and so on, to really design that solution for that particular problem as well. So next time you see someone saying left brain, right brain, and this is what you should be thinking about, please correct them. All of us have both sides and we use them to the maximum possible capacity to do the work that we want to, right? So with that, I wanted to get into a little more of details of how we are converting the patterns into value. And what I wanted to emphasize on is we're not so different. And that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of how we use questions to get a lot of answers of what we need, right? Designers ask questions to users and they probe them quite a lot to really understand what are the emotions that they're going through and how can they help solve their problem. Very similarly, data scientists question their data, right? I feel like the level of questions is the same. All of us are trying to identify why. And honestly, if you really ask me, I feel like every one of us are in the business of asking questions. Answers is everywhere. I'm sure with ChatGPT, anyone can get answers, but asking the right questions is going to become extremely important. And we're exactly in the business of that, right? The next thing is about abstracting user patterns versus data patterns, right? And with those questions and understanding users, designers try to find different patterns of how different users are working with each other, what are the interactions that they have, and how are they similar with one another. And it's exactly what a data scientist also does in terms of understanding how is that data correlated with something else, right? And of course, causality doesn't mean, correlation doesn't mean causality as well. And that's something that we explore to a lot of different statistical techniques. And I'm sure a lot of you would also have tried out validation through this processes as well, in terms of one, understanding users, but also validating it with data. And the same goes from the other way as well, right? In terms of identifying insights from the data, which is then validated through the users, like what Sarah had mentioned as well. But what do we do with all of this information is really solve the problem, right? And that's exactly what I wanted to emphasize on is I think our methods are different and we have different ways of approaching the problem. But I do think the end outcome that all of us are trying to drive is solve that problem and add value to a particular organization or a business stakeholder. Right. So with that, I like using this quote, which says design is the intermediary between information and understanding. And that's exactly how I believe we should be thinking about using design to get those insights to our end users as well. And I want to just call out that finding and insights are completely different. They're usually used interchangeably, whereas finding is just a piece of information that you find in your data, but insight is essentially why that's happening. So the way that we deliver this to our end users is where I believe design plays a very important role, right? So with that, I want to get to a couple of examples of something that we see on our everyday life, right? So one of the things that I wanted to share is everyday analytics. And these are products that we use on a day-to-day basis, but we don't really realize the impact that it has on our life, right? Just a very simple example is our fitness tracker, right? It is a very good example of very simple descriptive analytics that sort of comes up, but we don't appreciate the amount of data or the insights that we get from it because the experience is very smooth in that entire process that we don't even realize that there is analytics or an algorithm running behind it, right? Another example is the weather app, which has forecasts of what is going to happen the next day and the day after, which is amazingly visualized in terms of the background and the icons and so on, which we use every single day to understand what's going to happen the day after and plan our actions accordingly as well, right? And the last example I wanted to give was really Instagram. And I thought this would be a lot more relatable as well, because Instagram is super heavy on AI and ML algorithms that they run in terms of the content that you see on your first page versus the content that you see on your explore page and so on, right? And the recommendations and the kind of information that you see is super personalized and curated to the experience that you have with it. But the reason why we don't realize or we don't have a lot of friction with using any of these products is because it is beautifully designed with analytics and user experience in mind. So the next time we think about designing a dashboard, when I heard a lot of you speak as well, and there's a big theme of data visualization and data storytelling, which seems the most important in terms of design and how design can play a role in analytics, but that's where we're wrong, right? Of course, visualization is extremely important, all the way from designing your very simple descriptive charts to exploratory charts, to data art as well, right? On how you are representing the information, to even designing different simulators in terms of giving the power back to the user of taking those decisions and understanding what's going to happen if something changes, to packaging the information in different ways and conveying it through a story, from starting with, say, a top level analysis at a country and deep diving all the way to a store to really get to the root cause of the analysis, is something that we associate design helping analytics and the way that we work, right? But there are two other pieces that I want to concentrate on, which is the user experience and data literacy, right? So these are two things that I don't think a lot of us actively think about in terms of how can you offer a user experience to your customer as good as when you're using Instagram, right? I think the objective is not to throw examples, but the next time you use an app like that, think twice about how are they integrating those different algorithms and the forecast and the measurement into something as seamless when we use it on an application as well. Now think about borrowing that to our applications that we build on a day-to-day basis, right? Dashboards, analytical products, all of that. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about how can we give them a seamless experience as good as the B2C applications that exist today. We always consider them as a business to business, and it's boring information, if you will, and I don't have to care too much about the navigation, which actually plays a very big role, right? Just to give you an example, assortment planning is a very key problem that we solve in our organization. And assortment planning is not an analytical problem that you just get a solution for and you execute on it, but rather it's a process that you need to enable your user to go from a particular task till the end of that task. Right. So in cases like that, it's extremely important for us to look at user experience and follow all of the different design methods that exist to make sure that we are curating that particular experience for that particular user. The next big piece is data literacy. And I like to call this our very own marketing plan, if you will, a very good way of conveying the value of the messages and the insights that we want to give is through marketing activities, right? We've seen that all around us. The way that people communicate the messages in terms of brand, in terms of different newspapers, reports, everything is something that marketing is really good at, or value communication is really good at, right? So data literacy, the first part is going to be about how you enabling users to even understand what is the value that they're going to get from this particular dashboard or from this particular product. That's the first step. And then, of course, making them...
Gomathy, sorry, but your slide doesn't change the last maybe 3-4 minutes.
Yeah. Is it on the user experience and data literacy section?
Just yes, as a title slide. Is it okay?
Yeah. I was just covering like the basics. So the way that I think about data literacy is really how are you onboarding and communicating the value to your users of the kind of solution that you're going to give. And I'll get into details now, right? I think Sarah spoke about it quite a lot, so I don't want to rehash a lot of those messages, but a lot of design methods are extremely relevant to our world as well in terms of B2B apps and making sure that we're customizing it for different users. Something a CMO wants to see in an organization is going to be very different from an analyst who wants that information as well, right? And usually we look at a 3-step layers of information, from an executive summary to a tab that answers a specific question in terms of what is the store that's performing the best and why is it doing so, right? So these are different ways that we design our dashboards by understanding the different user personas, the different journey maps that they're going to take with that information, and of course, low fidelity, high fidelity prototypes, which I believe, apart from getting validation, I feel like it also brings your team on the same page of what you're trying to build, and it reduces the number of iterations and saves a lot of time and cost in that process. Because when I started working in this field, I used to change everything on my Power BI dashboard and go to my customer to say, hey, don't you like this better than the other one? And if they say no, I'll have to change it all back, which is going to take a lot more time compared to just creating it on Figma or Adobe, right? So these are extensive processes that we can follow to save a lot of time and cost. And the next section that I wanted to cover is really give an example that we usually ignore, which is the error messaging. This is an example that I wanted to call out in terms of just the change in messages, right? And how can you gracefully tell your user that they haven't done something or they have made an error in the way that they have entered a particular value or a number, but just the change in language and the copy makes a very big difference in terms of how often they're going to use the tool as well. Because in analytical tools or in products that you're building for B2B folks, there is anyway an existing friction because you're introducing a new tool to their system and they would have an existing process that they follow today. So you need to onboard them and make sure that they are not offboarding before you want them to as well. So some of these elements in terms of the copy that you're using on your dashboard is also extremely important for them to feel comfortable with it and come back to it as well. The last section that I wanted to focus on is really how do you build habits of people coming back to your dashboard every single day or use it as much as you want them to or the way that you've designed them to. And I follow a 3-step process in making this happen. The first one is really how do you get them excited? And all of this lays on the fundamental belief that you understand your users well, and you definitely know what are the friction points that they have, right? For example, it could be a person who is extremely comfortable in Excel and you're asking them to move to Power BI or Tableau, which they're not willing to learn. Or it could be someone who doesn't believe in data science at all and has been in the business for 20 years and then doesn't want to spend a lot of time understanding data and taking decisions from it as well. So the first step is what are the messages that you can give to that particular user to make sure that you're exciting them and making sure that they're looking forward to the tool that's being launched, right? So this could be done through different posters, different goodies that you can send out, or teaser videos of what the tool is going to look like, just to pique that interest and make sure that they are looking forward to it. The second step is something that I think we've been doing for quite some time in terms of educating users, but a way that's worked for us is how can you gamify that experience as well. In this particular example, we created a bunch of questions and we gave them points if they find an answer to a question very quickly. And all of the answers were in the dashboard. So at the end of the workshop, they were able to understand what are the different questions they can get answers for, as well as know where to go find that in the dashboard as well. Right? And they had a lot of fun doing it as well. So how can you educate users through workshops and to user manuals and all of different supporting artifacts that you can give them to make sure that they know how to use it is the second step. The third one is again something that we ignored in terms of reinforcing the usage of it as well. How can you make that interesting? For example, we did badges for people who would use our tool a lot and take a lot of decisions from it. So there was like an ongoing competition in that particular organization to get the maximum number of badges. And just a very simple thing is creating a Teams channel and just engaging with the users again and again and giving them different insights, a monthly newsletter, and so on to make sure that they see the different insights and they're taking decisions from it as well. And that cute mascot that you see over here is another way where we created a character for that particular dashboard and the product to make sure that they feel connected to it. And we connected it to the FAQ section as well, so that they're able to ask questions to the mascot and sort of have like a fun relationship with it as well. But the most important thing that I think works the best is really testimonial videos. And I can't stress this enough as well. Just getting a testimonial video from someone who you did a user acceptance testing with, for example, and just sharing it with everyone else builds a very big sense of FOMO, if you will. And that works really well in helping us, push that product and get people excited and make sure that people are using it again and again. Right. So these are some ways that I've used to make sure that people are adopting our tools, which are designed perfectly as well. So that's pretty much all I had. What I really wanted to emphasize and end with is really the fact that I think all of us have very different skills, but collaborating together is going to help drive business and value a lot more. So that's the only thing that is my ask really. And if you want to connect with me, that's a QR code with my LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gomathy. And I'm looking for questions, but again, really, it's so clear, it's so well structured, and I like your design. Yes, people say that they now following you.
Yeah.
What information do you show in monthly newsletters?
Yeah, so again, it depends on the type of users. At least the monthly newsletters have mostly been with the execs who usually don't have time to look at our dashboard as well. So with them, we usually show the main KPIs and the change compared to the previous month. And that's usually the biggest information that they usually look for. But at the same time, one of the things that we enable for them as well is also that question and answer sequence. For a lot of Power BI dashboards, we build a mobile interface and we connect it to the Q&A enabled section, so they're able to ask questions on their mobile and get answers as well. So those are a couple of things that we've done for that newsletter piece. Yeah.
Okay, we have a few minutes to ask more questions. While we are waiting for them, let's launch our rating system. Great. Oh, I have a question. So, did you have an exclusion from your approach when it didn't work?
Oh, yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we had to learn over time was also not be rigid with respect to the design process as well, right? That if you're building user personas, you only should do it if there are different varied set of users as well, right? So sometimes I think the biggest exclusions that we had to do was really in terms of process, right? And maybe we don't have to do this persona, or we don't have to do information architecture, for example, is extremely important for dashboards, but a task flow is even more important for a tool like the assortment, right? A process or a workflow sort of tool. So those are some inclusions and exclusions that you need to be smart about, because speed is key. So making sure that you're building this at speed is extremely essential. So those are definitely some exclusions that we did in that process.